Yeah, I mean, that happens. I've actually started saying I don't like the individual reporting on what they did, what they're going to do, and with the impediments they have. I've just that doesn't work for me anymore.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Real Agile or BS. I'm Peter Saddington with Bob Hartman, and we're going to jump right in here, guys, to your frequently asked questions. We get a lot around this one, and so let's dive right in. The topic for today is 30-minute daily stand-ups, which I think in a lot of ways, some Scrum teams end up doing that kind of just as they get going. But I'm going to throw this right over to you, Bob. What do you think? 30-minute daily stand-ups, real agile or BS?
Well, I think they have to be BS, Peter, because the daily stand up is supposed to be a short meeting where we're trying to align to what we're going to do that day. I think the problem is people get into these 30-minute daily stand ups because they're trying to answer a lot of questions that they shouldn't be asking or answering during the daily stand up. And so for me, is if we're doing a daily stand up that's taking 30 minutes, is everyone truly engaged for all 30 minutes? If the answer is no, then that meeting's too long. I'm not saying the answer won't always be that. I think there are teams that every once in a while, if it takes 30 minutes because they have to dig in together as a team on something that came up and it's an issue, and they choose to do that, I could be okay with it. But on a regular basis, that just sounds all kinds of wrong to me. How about you?
Well, the Scrum guide tells us, and there's a lot of guidance on this that it's supposed to be 15 minutes. And I've often struggled with this idea of making it a really hardened time box of saying, oh, 15 minutes are up, we're done. And so when I've worked with teams, I've always given a little bit of leeway, especially if there needs to be more context shared from an engineer, developer, QA, or whoever is in the daily stand up. And I don't mind going over 15 minutes, but certainly not to the 30-minute length. I think a great facilitator, a great scrum master would be able to say, hey, let's table this topic. Not everyone needs to be involved here. Maybe it's just Bob and Peter and Susie and Sally and not everyone else. And so generally a great scrum master, a great facilitator can say, hey, let's table that. Let's move that discussion so that we can continue to move on and make sure that we're all aligned. I think it's important for everyone out there to remember. And a daily stand-up, at least in my opinion, this is the way that I look at it, but a daily stand-up is an opportunity to align for the day. And that's generally how I begin conversations around what is the purpose of a daily scrum. It's to make sure that we're all in alignment, to make sure that we all know what's going on. There's transparency there around what people are doing. And I think most importantly, one of the things that I always focus on is who needs to be involved with what. Rarely, if ever, is development a solo man's job or one man, one woman on an island. We have to integrate. We have to work with other individuals, and sometimes their work crosses over to other people's work. And so I think it's really important to be able to make sure that everyone's aligned, number one, but number two, make sure that everyone knows where they're going to be needed throughout that day. And so for me, I don't worry too much about, hey, give me all the details and nuances. For me, it's important that at the end of a daily scrum, everyone knows that, hey, this is what's going to get done today. This is where I need to be engaged in the process today. And this is where I need to lend maybe a helping hand. What about you?
Yeah, I go a similar way, but I guess I dumb it down a little more. I tell people the goal of the daily scrum is to basically, at the end of the daily scrum, we as a team should know how we're going to approach that day in a way that maximizes our effectiveness. So we know how we're going to work together that day. It's the same as saying alignment, but as soon as you tell people they're trying to maximize their effectiveness through this, then it starts to become something they can engage with. Okay, I understand to maximize my effectiveness, I need to understand how I'm going to work together with you. I need to understand how this impediment is going to be removed. I need to understand those things so I can plan my work for the day to be most effective. So you can plan your work for the day to be most effective. And hopefully we're most effective together. So
I
I
really
like
like that.
that approach. I also don't mind teams scheduling 30 minutes for their daily scrum, but I always tell them the first part, the true daily scrum, should be 15 minutes or less. And I stress the or less part because most teams just drag on and on. But then I tell them the other 15 minutes are for those ad hoc meetings you need to have in small groups because of the things that came up. So now we know how we're aligned. Now let's talk about how we're actually going to do the work. And that might be that second 15 minutes, but it's a separate piece And I think keeping them separate in your heads makes more sense because not everybody needs to be at that second part.
Have you, I had this with one client in the past. I wonder if you've experienced this where we did a daily scrum. It was a pretty substantial group. I think it was about maybe 13, 14, maybe even 15 people, which was pretty hefty. But I remember what we did was we had essentially a very hardened time box of 15 minutes. Everyone shared, hey, this is what I'm going to be doing, et cetera, et cetera. And then we broke out into smaller groups afterwards. Is that something that you would recommend?
Yeah, I mean that happens. I've actually started saying I don't like the individual reporting on what they did, what they're going to do, and with the impediments they have. I've just that doesn't work for me anymore. So I always have people run their board. What's going to
Yes.
happen on this item today? Who's going to work on it? What's going to happen on this item today? That also lets me limit work in progress because I only go down a few items and then ask at the end, hey, what else are you planning to work on? So I can make sure that I'm the scrum master. A great scrum master would want to know what are we working on that's not in the backlog because I need to go talk to those people, make sure that work goes off our plate. So I think I don't mind the concept. I just don't like those old three questions anymore. I think it's just easier for teams to focus on the flow of
Mm.
each of those items rather than the work that each of them are doing. So to me, it's easier to gain alignment around that.
Oh, absolutely. We are visually inclined creatures. And so I find to be able to walk the board and say, hey, these are the stories I'm working on, these are the tasks I'm working on, are a lot more actionable than the ephemeral, hey, I'm working on ticket issue 552. It's like, well, what is that? I have no idea. So certainly having and leveraging a physical wall board or a digital wall board during your daily scrum will give you a lot more opportunity to be aligned. And I love I love what you said here is maximize, right? Maximize your effectiveness, right? It's very focused towards, hey, these are the tasks, these are the stories that we're going to be working on today as a team. So how can we maximize effectiveness and make sure that we complete those to the best of our ability? So I like that a lot. So for
Yeah,
every,
the word I left out there is I definitely say maximize effectiveness because as soon as you say maximize productivity, that gets the wrong result. We can work really hard and be very productive and not produce anything. So effectiveness is a key word in that sentence. And but the other thing we have to tell people is, what's the action if you actually have a 30-minute daily scrum, what should you do? And I'm always telling scrum masters, if you're having daily scrums that are going too long, you kind of have to examine, are the people engaged? Who's engaged during different parts of that? And any place where it's not everyone being engaged or a high percentage being engaged, those are things you need to kick out of your daily scrum because those aren't adding value to everybody. A daily scrum, when you think about it, is a very expensive meeting, right? I mean, it's an hour a week or more for everybody on the team. And when you take people at high tech salaries for an hour a week for 52 weeks a year for an entire team, it's a $40,000 meeting every year. So it's not a small investment. So we should spend that time wisely.
I really like that. I agree with you wholeheartedly that the daily scrum should be a high engagement opportunity for everyone. And if people are not engaged, then we're missing something there. So everyone out there, let us know your comments, your ideas around the 30-minute daily scrum. I think both Agile Bob and myself, we agree that it is BS to go 30 minutes. And so give us your comments, give us your ideas. Obviously, subscribe, smash the like button, and we'll see you guys in the next one.